What's up, y'all? Toya here, and I am back with another video for y'all. Before we get into the video, make sure you guys either like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Alright, y'all, so today we gotta talk about what's going on in New York. Man, New York City, y'all, it seems like y'all always got something going on over there. I ain't gonna lie, you know. Not meaning in a bad way, but it be a little busy over there, okay? So there was an article that was released a few days ago talking about some potential laws coming into play which could benefit gig workers. So I wanted to go through this article, read it together. I'll go ahead and make some points while I'm reading it, and then I'll go ahead and sum up how I feel about everything, okay? So New York City set to expand minimum pay law for delivery workers. The city council is expected to pass a package of bills to include nearly 20,000 grocery delivery workers in legislation that improved working conditions for food delivery workers. So they start off by saying how there was a few bills that were passed back in 2021 to set minimum pay and address difficult working conditions for food delivery workers, but those were only for Grubhub, DoorDash, and Uber Eats. Now, this new legislation will require third-party app companies like Instacart and Shipt to pay grocery delivery workers a minimum of $21.44 an hour. They will also mandate that companies provide an option in their apps to give at least a 10% tip before or at the same time an order is placed, and that the companies must pay workers within 7 days of the end of the pay period. So now with this tip, I'm a little confused because I don't know if this means they're mandating that a minimum of a 10% tip is given, or if there's going to be an option for tips and the option is going to be a minimum of 10%. So they can't give less than 10%, but they have an option to do 10% tip at least or no tip at all. So it doesn't really clarify. I would hope that maybe that does include a mandatory tip, but if somebody can clarify that, I would appreciate it. And then they go on to discuss, you know, how the delivery industry boomed during the pandemic. And I think we can all agree that 2020, 2021 was pretty much the peak for gig work. And then this section here, Instacart said in a statement, at a time when millions across the city are already struggling with rising costs for food and daily essentials, we urge the city council to consider the real world consequences this bill could have on families and communities that depend on grocery delivery the most. Let me pause right here for a second, okay? First of all, the only reason y'all saying that is because y'all want people to go ahead and keep on ordering off your platform. 1. 2, we have to stop coddling these customers, okay? You know, the fact that you said that this is something that people depend on, your words in this statement, it says people depend on, right? These apps, as I've stated many of times before, these apps are not necessities. They are luxuries. I don't care if they come at a premium cost. For some, I guess some people consider it a premium cost, you know, it's a luxury, okay? Because if you go back, you know, 10, 15, 20 years, you know, when I was a kid, you know, my mama needed to go ahead and get some groceries. She couldn't go ahead and be like, oh, let me go ahead and call up such and such, go ahead and get this stuff delivered. Or let me go ahead and we didn't even have smartphones then. You know, you had to go ahead and go to the store. You had to go to the store, or you had to go and tell somebody to go to the store, give them the grocery list or whatever. They go and write it down on their notepad or whatever, piece of paper, back of the envelope of the mail, whatever. You know, go ahead and get that grocery, get them groceries, man. Nah, bro, we got to stop this. I can understand for people who may be elderly, disabled, you know, I get that, because sometimes I order Instacart for my mom when I can't make it to her house. You know, she might need a couple things. I'll be like, all right, I Instacart to you, right? You know, for people who are able-bodied, and it's y'all just lazy. I'm not gonna lie, okay? Y'all are lazy. Y'all lack independence. Y'all don't know how to manage your time properly. I don't know what it is with this current generation. You know, I'm not even that much older. I'm in my early 30s, but I'm just saying a lot of people, it's people my age, older, younger. A lot of y'all just, I don't know, how do y'all depend on these apps like it's life or death? Okay, I legit don't understand, but I don't want to rant too much about that, right? But I'm not gonna lie, Instacart, y'all part of the problem too, okay? You know, you got these crazy fees. The prices of the food items are higher than what they are in the store. You know, and what does the driver get? I can tell you, because that's why I really don't do Instacart that much, because the pay is trash for the amount of work that you have to do, okay? The fact that y'all say, y'all, Instacart. Anyway, now to continue. So there was a councilwoman, Sandy Nurse, Democrat, who sponsored the grocery delivery workers bill, said that she had watched the delivery companies evolve over the years at the workers' expense. Man, that's not only for grocery, that's for food delivery, pretty much all of these apps. That's the thing, these third-party companies, you know, they want to use these apps, they want to use these platforms. There's no regulation. They can get away with a lot more than if you had these people hired on as W-2 employees. Companies know this, they just do whatever. There's another section here. One of the sponsors of the 3 bills in the package had said that he had noticed forms of retaliation from third-party apps, like randomly deactivating workers' accounts and removing the tipping option at checkout. Now, I'm not gonna lie, I don't use too many delivery apps as far as like DoorDash, Grubhub, Instacart. Like, I use them every now and then. I will say I noticed on Instacart, I tried to place an order and I noticed that the tip was set to the lowest percentage. I think it was like, I don't even think it was 5%. I can't remember. I've noticed that tip percentage has gone down in comparison to how it was when I first used Instacart in the past. And I think that was like maybe 3 or so years ago when I first used Instacart. For food delivery, like I said, I don't do food delivery too often, but I will say that the tipping option isn't necessarily hidden, at least from what I've seen. But I would say that it's a bit more difficult to notice. You can overlook it and then you may not even realize, like, oh crap, I didn't leave a tip. But the retaliation, you know, I'm not surprised, because I guess you can say they kind of did that when they did this last round of the raising of the minimum wages for drivers in New York. A lot of people got deactivated. And they had also discussed how they had planned to introduce legislation to prohibit the abrupt deactivation of delivery workers by major third-party apps. So definitely, like, I haven't been deactivated on any platforms as of yet, but I've heard countless stories of people just waking up one morning and they're like, all right, I'm about to go do such and such app, and then they're deactivated. They give a very vague reason, or the reason it doesn't make sense. You know, it could be a customer complaint that led to a deactivation, but it's not the full story, and you know, all of that, right? Now, there are some other points here, but these are pretty much the primary points in this article. I will link it below if you guys want to read it entirely. But I just want to go ahead and give my thoughts on how I feel about it. Now, I know that some people might be against the government getting involved in gig work. You know, they can make a mess of things. You know, they may not fully understand everything, and you know, I get it, but at the same time, how long can we let this keep going unchecked? And while I personally haven't been in the gig scene that long, I would say about 3 years, you know, I'm seeing the same complaints, and they're just getting worse and worse. You know, the pay, of course, you know, base pay being trash, the lack of tips from the customers, the wrongful deactivations, you know, the list goes on. And like I said, it's just been getting worse and worse and worse over time. But, you know, it's gotten to the point, it's gotten so bad that a lot more people, you know, they say gig work is dead, you know? And while I might say that it's dependent on how you look at gig work, you know, if you think it's dead, then yeah, it's gonna look dead to you, right? But if you see opportunity, there's going to be opportunity. But as a whole, like overall, I can understand why people constantly say that. It's like fighting an uphill battle, but that hill is either getting higher and higher, or something keeps getting pulled from up under you, so you're just falling. So I can definitely understand why people might say that. And even for those who might not necessarily say that gig work is dead, you know, they might say, well, it's not even worth getting into, you know, you got to do all this, you got to do that, you know, it's just not worth your time. Now, there is another crowd out there that will say, well, gig work is supposed to be used as a side hustle. You shouldn't expect too much, you know, you shouldn't be thinking like an employee where you have all these protections and this and that. And my response to that, I'm just like, so I shouldn't expect to be treated like a human being just because I decide to take off my hat for my W-2 and put on a hat to do gig work on the side. That means that I should be taken advantage of? That doesn't make any type of sense. You know, there's a huge difference between wanting to be treated like an employee and just simply wanting to be treated like a human being. Yes, the gig apps may not be as profitable as they were during the pandemic, but they are doing just fine. And these apps are going to continue to grow as more and more companies opt to use these third-party options. I literally had like, I don't know, 3 or 4 deliveries last week, and they were from people in their car, minivan, like no FedEx, no UPS. And this wasn't anything like same day I was getting delivered. These are actual businesses online. I placed an online order and it took anywhere from 3 to 7 days for it to come to my door. But they're being delivered third party. They're not coming through the traditional, you know, USPS or FedEx or UPS, like I said. And why is that? It's because companies know that they can cut corners and save on costs by going third party. And nobody's keeping them in check. Nobody's making sure the drivers are paid fairly, none of that. Now, we saw what happened in New York previously. Like they said, drivers got deactivated, and you can blame it on the fact that customers didn't want to use the service anymore because the fees were higher, or the apps just couldn't afford to pay the same number of drivers that they had before. But none of these CEOs are struggling. Sure, like I said, their profits might be down in comparison to the pandemic, but they ain't struggling. DoorDash's CEO, his net worth is $2.9 billion. $2.9 billion as of this year. The former CEO of Instacart, his net worth was roughly $1.3 billion. And even with Instacart's new CEO, he gets paid $1.37 million in salary, and then he has another $30 million in stock awards. So I'm pretty sure these people are doing just fine. We cannot keep defending these people, okay? They have to be held accountable. And I'm still stuck on the fact that the Instacart CEO is talking about these people struggling, bro. You are literally part of the problem. You are the reason that people are struggling. This is literally capitalism in a nutshell. Like, obviously, supply and demand makes a lot of sense. It makes prices go up when the supply is low and the demand is high. I get that, okay? But if you're trying to grow some strawberries and sell these strawberries, I'm pretty sure the dirt and the seeds and all of that, they're not like, hey, you know, I want some of that Voss water instead of that regular hose water. You know, I ain't gonna be growing unless you go ahead and supplement me correctly. Okay, I need that premium fertilizer. Nah, they ain't. The strawberries is just gonna strawberry. The strawberries is gonna do what strawberries do, okay? You know, you can go ahead and take the cow and go ahead and get the fertilizer directly from the cow if you wanted to. You know, the strawberries, ain't nothing different about them strawberries other than the fact that they might be cutting cost to produce more, and it might be a lower quality strawberry. But the companies are like, hey, you know what? We got these strawberries. We gonna sell them for about, I don't know how much strawberries go for now because I usually don't buy them that often. Let's just say they going for like $5 a pop, right? So you got a case of strawberries for like $5. You know, you could probably go back about, let's just say go back during the pandemic days. I can guarantee you them strawberries was probably half the price that they cost now. Okay, what changed that caused strawberries to need to go up so much? Like I said, them strawberries ain't saying, oh, we need Voss water, nothing like that. It's the companies. They said make it cheaper to produce, sell it at a higher price. It's that simple. It is that simple. These greedy companies just want more profits at the expense of their workers. They will say we had record-breaking profits. We made X amount of extra dollars. You know, we went over our goal. They'll give themselves a bonus. Everybody else, you go ahead and get your little 2-3% raise, if you get a raise. Overall, CEOs are making so much more money than the average worker. It is crazy. I gotta find this article I found. It's from last year, I think it's like over 1,000% increase in wages for CEOs in comparison to the common worker, which is not even close to that. Keep in mind, this is not just for gig apps. This is all around. But, you know, that's obviously a different topic for another day. But just in relation to this article, these CEOs of these apps, they're doing perfectly fine. There's no reason that the government should be getting involved, but here we are. Like I said, there's no regulation. People are doing whatever they want. Nobody is keeping them in check. They're just doing whatever. So if all of these bills do pass, like they said, there could be that retaliation, you know, deactivation of drivers. But sometimes when it comes to, you know, changes of this scale, you know, things might get a little ugly. Things might get a little uncomfortable. And if this were to spread at the federal level, you know, only time would tell what's going to happen. Because we're already seeing some cities take initiative and they're passing their own bills and their own laws. So, like I said, if this does come to a federal level at some point, like I said, we're just going to have to see how it plays out. But something has to be done at this point. People want to argue that drivers' pay shouldn't be at the burden of the customers. And I agree with that 100%. You know, I am for tipping, just primarily for the fact that I know drivers are exploited. And knowing that they're exploited, you know, I want to do my part to make sure that they are taken care of. I'm showing them that level of respect that they're not getting from the company, okay? Is that my job to do that? No. But if I'm using the service, I'm showing my appreciation to you. I have the money, I can afford it. I'm gonna go ahead and make sure that you're tipped accordingly. But again, for those who might say that that burden shouldn't be on the customer, don't go and say that you don't want the government to get involved in this, okay? Because they're not gonna have a change of heart all of a sudden. The DoorDash CEO isn't gonna come out and be like, oh, you know what, after a long, hard discussion with my team and this and that, you know, we want to make sure that our drivers are taken care of, and we're gonna go ahead and implement $5 base pay. You think they gonna do that? Hell no, they ain't about to do that. So yes, if there has to be regulation to make sure these people are in check, then so be it. So you gotta pick a side, okay? It's either gonna be on the customers or it's gonna be on the company. And like I said, that company, these apps, they ain't gonna have a change of heart. So government it is. That's all I can say. But yeah, guys, that's pretty much it. That's pretty much all I got for this video. So yeah, I would love to know what y'all think about this. Like I said, I know a lot of people may not be for government involvement, but what other options do we have? We can't organize ourselves, apparently, because, you know, we're so divided amongst ourselves. So, hey, if the government has to come and step in, then so be it. Could it be for the better? I would hope. Could it be for the worse? That is also a possibility. But we're just gonna have to go ahead and see how this plays out in New York. You know, think of this as like a little test, you know, and we're just gonna have to go from there. So, but yeah, guys, just let me know what y'all think. Like I said, you know, are you for this? Are you against it? Do you think there is a better solution that doesn't involve the government? You know, just let me know in the comments. But before I go, I have to remind you guys to leave a like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you do not miss a video. But I'm gonna go ahead and get up out of here, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'm gonna catch you guys on the next one. And as always, stay safe out there and keep grinding.